What's up, everybody? Welcome to another Three Geeks interview. It's Jason and Justin. Today we are joined by Jerry Carita. How you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you?
I'm doing great. So Justin messaged me and goes, he was involved with Comic Book Man. I'm like, are you sure you have the right guy? So I jumped online and like you were involved as a producer with like so many shows. How do you go from that to being a comic book creator?
So I worked on Comic Book Man. That was like 11 years ago, something like that. I was a supervising producer in the first season, before they kind of knew what the format was even. And my whole comics book fandom and journey all starts on that show. I did not grow up reading comics. I didn't have that period when I was a kid of being the kid that read comics. My geek thing when I was a kid was TV stuff. I used to watch like Star Trek with my mom. Like that was my geek thing, was fun TV, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, fantasy and 80s fantasy movies. Those were my like geek things when I was a kid. And I started reading comic books on the set of Comic Book Man. The first comic I ever read was The Walking Dead. I read that whole thing all the way through. The Walking Dead, the show, was only in like I think its second season when I did that. And I just fell in love with the medium and I started reading it. And so yeah, I was on Comic Book Man. I am by day generally a TV producer, and by night I do this, and I do this by day too. Let's be serious. And but yeah, I've worked on a lot of cool shows over the years, and I got to work with Kevin Smith a few times. I did another really big show that I really enjoyed. That I wish a lot more shows would have come back that I had worked on. I did some fun ones, like I did a Wife Swap, and I did Counting Cars, which was on History Channel for a lot of years. I did a season of The Food That Built America, which is still on now. But like Comic Book Men was a ton of fun. And then I did a show called Epic Inc., which was like a geek tattoo series with all these guys that used to be on the Star Wars tour. They would go to like Star Wars Celebration and do these, like if you wanted Han Solo life-size on your chest, this guy would do it. And the eyes would look real, like it would look alive.
Oh, that's super cool.
Yeah, they were very cool. All of them were very talented guys. Very, very good show. But that was my TV experience. I still do it. I'm working as a writer right now on an A&E true crime series that isn't on TV yet. It'll be on, I think, a month or so. And then I do this. But that's where my comic book thing started. It was on Comic Book Men, with Kevin Smith and all those guys. And Walt Flanagan actually did a cover for me for this book. He was one of the stars of the show.
That's awesome.
Do you reach out to them after you've made the comic book? Like, you guys got me doing this. Like, it's because of you guys that I'm now a comic book creator.
Yeah, I mean, they're all still. So I played poker with Mike Sapsik over the weekend. A mutual friend out in Jersey had a game that he has every year. Ming Chen did a live launch for me. So I was podcasting with him live when I turned the Kickstarter campaign on for the first time. I've worked with Kevin a few times since then, and then Brian Johnson and Walt. I text both of them every once in a while. Walt and I have both worked a lot with Blue Juice Comics, so we've been at a few cons together. He drove actually down from Jersey all the way to MegaCon in Orlando to sell some books. He does a book with Blue Juice called The Knights of the Fifth Dimension, which is like a really cool book, by the way. And I was helping them sell some books and stuff.
You got any
so when I did this, I just was like, what's that?
You got any cons coming up in Ohio?
I don't know, but I actually, so one of the things I'm going to do in the next year is I want to make a list of all the ones I can really hit. I have a wife and 3 kids, and like if I was like, I'm going to go away every weekend to a different convention, I feel like I wouldn't have a wife and 3 kids anymore. So as much as I'm like, no, I'm selling, it's for later. It's a career building thing. It's always like, yeah. Like pay you now or you stay home and you deal with these kids with me, which by the way is totally fair, and it's fine. But one of the things I want to do is figure out how to go to more. I've done a bunch of local ones in New York. I did in the last year I did the Brooklyn Comic Con. I did one in Fairfax, Virginia. I did one that was I did 2 in Jersey actually. So I'm branching out and starting to do them all now, and mostly with Blue Juice. Blue Juice has a lot of books that they've been publishing for years, and I've been working with them as an editor for the last 2 years.
So for the local cons, do you bring the kids and wife along? Do they help you kind of run the booth? Is that pretty fun?
I brought my 2 boys on different days to the Brooklyn Comic Con, and my younger one, who's actually really into comics, And we're actually, he had an idea for a comic that I'm writing. We're kind of like co-write. He gives me notes on it for real. He's 7 years old.
That's fun.
Right?
Yeah, that's awesome.
So he came and he spent most of the day just trying to look at an iPad. And then my older boy, who is like athletic in a way that I never was, you know, he was really into selling. So he was walking around with these little postcards and just recruiting people to come over to the table and trying to like pitch these books that he hadn't read. But he was like, yeah, it's you like time travel, you know? He's like 12 years old talking to approaching adults in in Brooklyn and just being like, are you into pirates? There's a book over here about pirates, you know? It was very sweet. But yeah, of course, putting the whole family to work, you know? Absolutely.
I mean, anything good small business would. It's great.
Of course.
So let's talk Cicada Samurai. I mean, what kind of got you into cicadas, and what kind of get you into the Cicada Samurai? It's good. Yeah.
So yeah, it's a weird thing to be into. So where are you guys? You're in Ohio, Jason and Justin. Are you also in Ohio?
Yeah. As soon as I heard the word cicada, I remember 2 years ago where I couldn't sleep because of the wave of sound that was coming from
everywhere.
That's exactly what happened. So it's called Brood X. It was every 17 years they reemerge, right? And I started reading about them that year, and then I don't know how it happened, but I found myself listening to a podcast about cicadas, and like they're such like dumb, defenseless. It's just a big dopey fly. It's a big stupid dopey fly, and they're bad at flying because they're only above ground for like 3 weeks and then they die. So by the time they learn how to fly, they're dead, you know? So they fly into your window, they fly into the trees, they bounce into each other. Millions of them are eaten by foxes and like cats and like birds. And there's a thing called the Cicada Killing Hornet, which is this nightmarish, horrible thing. And I started reading about all these things. There was a podcast I listened to about cicada superstitions. When Europeans first got here, they don't have cicadas in Europe. They have locusts. So they thought they were these awful things that were going to kill them. They thought they were like a plague from the Bible, from the devil. You know, these are people these are like people who came here because they weren't allowed to burn witches back home, so they moved here, right?
Yeah.
And like, so they were super superstitious. And you know, when the cicadas first, like, they crawl out of the ground in millions, numbering millions. They rip out of a shell, and then the thing that crawls out of the shell is bright green with big red eyes. They thought it was a demon. They thought it was like the eyes were red because it's been staring into the fires of hell, you know? It's really weird. And so I started reading about it, and my first thought was, what if some of these superstitions were true? And I just had that like on a loop in my head. And then I started to, I'm in a writer's workshop that Scott Snyder runs, and he basically he always says things about what you should write. And there's that expression, like, write what you know, which is kind of not, I'm not a scientist. I don't know anything about bugs, right? But you pick a story that is something that you relate to, that, you know, if it's a horror story, it's something you fear. And so I have, like we talked about, I have kids, and, you know, my older one is spending more and more time out where I can't keep him safe. So I was like, imagine now, that freaks me out, right? I have a lot of anxiety about it. So I have 3 kids. Keeping them alive is very hard. Just 3 kids. Imagine if I had 1 million kids who all hit teen years at the same time, and I'm the only adult, and my whole job is to protect them from everything that wants to kill them. And then I was like, okay, so there's one cicada who's an immortal, and he needs some kind of fighting powers. It feels like a hopeless mission, you know, like a samurai kind of a thing. It's one of those stories that just, to me, felt like a samurai story, like an old Western, you know, like, which are really just samurai stories, you know. So that's kind of how it all came together in my head. I literally had cicadas buzzing in the back of my head when I started thinking about, like, writing a story about my kids getting older and how the world is dangerous out there, and I got to protect them from it. So it all just kind of mushed together into this thing in my head, and that's where we are.
That's awesome. So, forgive me, but I thought, like, a good follow-up story would also be like a noir version of this, like this cicada, like, just like a weird detective office, and you're just like, you killed one of my millions, I have to figure out who murdered it. that could be
the story that takes place in between the 17 years,
right?
You know, like, after all of those cicadas have been murdered, he's just sitting around for 17 years waiting for the next brood. So what's he's going to just solve all those crimes and figure it out.
Be a fun black and white, I think. It'd be fun.
yeah. Like with like a hat, you know, like, you know, like investigating all the birds that murdered all of his kin, you know. It's funny.
So after you've written the story, how do you go about finding the right artist to do the illustrations for you?
So for this one, I got really lucky. I wrote an outline. I had an idea. I had not yet written a script, and I just started following people on Instagram that I really liked. And through Blue Juice, I was already following a bunch of artists. I started doing that myself, and then I just reached out to some people that I liked, and I got really lucky. Takashi Okazaki, who did Afro Samurai, he was just into it right away. I just sent him a message on Instagram, and he got back to me, and I nearly passed out. He was like, "Yeah, dude, I'm into it." Apparently cicadas are also native to Japan. I didn't know that. And so he knew all about them, and he had all this artwork that are old Japanese cartoons and toys that are loosely based on the look of a cicada. So, he right away had some ideas, and he's incredibly busy. He does a lot of animation work, and he's also, you guys probably know, he did the Star Wars Visions book for Marvel, and he did does a lot of anime and a lot of video game designs. So he works all the time. So I'm some schmuck on Instagram, but he got back to me and then sent me some ideas. And then every couple of months, I would wake up to emails from Takashi with some new designs for the samurai, for the Hornet, Cicada Killing Hornet, and for like a praying mantis based kaiju monster thing that will be down the road later in the story.
Oh man, I can't wait for that.
They're monsters. Insects are the worst. They're just such monsters, every one of them. The Cicada Killing Hornet will actually catch and sting and paralyze a live cicada, drag it back to its burrow, and then lay eggs around it, and then seal up the chamber and leave. And when the eggs hatch, they instinctively know to eat the cicada alive, but to avoid the vital organs. So it's just paralyzed while these babies are eating it for days.
What a nightmare.
And I read that and I was like, that is a comic book monster. That is like up there with like Jason and Freddy Krueger and like actually terrifying shit. Like that's the Thin Man, It's like right there, right up there with it. So, it's a great villain. So that's my big bad for the series, So,
but I got lucky. Yeah, that's awesome. I am struck with the art. It looks incredible, at least on your Kickstarter. I'm always interested in hearing about what made you decide on the pledges, and how hard is it to do aluminum prints and things like that? Is there any who do you ship that off to? How do you do it? Do you have something in your basement where you're just pressing?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, for a lot of it, I'm kind of winging it. This week, I hit my number pretty quickly, my minimum, to do it. So I got there in a little over 3 days. And so I started looking at stretch goals, and I was like, I decided not to do stretch goals. I decided I just wanted to get everything I could do. I'm just going to do it because I didn't want to be a couple $100 short of something that I wanted to do. Sure. So I just said I'm going to do it. So I expanded the story. But yeah, the covers, the tiers. I just basically, my series artist is Mary Landro. She did 2 of my covers. Each of those is a tier. Walt Flanagan from Comic Book Man and from the Tell and Steve Dave podcast, he did a cover. And then I took Takashi's original designs and I made that a cover. And those are my 4 covers. I didn't want to be cover crazy my first time out doing this. And then the aluminum print is only because Mary does that as a side business.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah. So my artist, Mary Landro, she's in Edmonton in Canada, and she goes to cons with this business where she takes her own art and prints it on these 1/10 of an inch thick sheets of aluminum, anywhere from 4x6 up to 16x24. So I just picked 2 of the sizes and said, let's do this. You can have the cover art, and hang it on your wall as a giant piece of metal if you like. And I've had a few people bite on that. It's a very cool prize, and it'll ship directly from her, so she can ship it directly to whoever orders it. So the shipping, we're mitigating those costs. It should be $25 to ship, which is considering it's this gigantic 3x4 sheet of metal, but that's it. And I didn't do anything. I didn't do foil covers. I didn't go crazy otherwise. If you want to get all the covers, you can do that, but I didn't want to go too nuts on my first time out.
Sure, makes total sense. So, when doing a Kickstarter, what was the biggest hurdle, or since you said it was your first time, is there something that surprised you, or do you know enough people in the industry? You're I kind of expected all this stuff that happened to me.
So, Blue Juice just did their first Kickstarter, and I did a lot of the work on that. It's for Billy the Kit, which is Justin Gray wrote. Barry McLean's the artist, and Justin's been doing Kickstarter comics for a while now. You know, he used to write for DC back in the day. He wrote Jonah Hex, did a lot of work with Jimmy Palmiotti, but he's been doing indie books through Kickstarter for a lot of years now. So he and I are buddies now. We've been talking, and he kind of guided me through a lot of it. But I did a lot of the work for the Blue Juice Kickstarter. So I wouldn't say I was surprised. I'm surprised and like amazed every time I look at how many comics are doing really well raising money on Kickstarter.
Sure.
You know, because it's like you always hear people talk about how comics are dead or they're dying or the industry is like tanking, and it's like it's not. I think the two biggest people have a lot more like Marvel and DC have a lot more competition now. There are a lot of really major independent publishers and tons of people like me who, thanks to the internet, you know, if I can find 100 people who want to buy my idea, I can make the book and I can sell it. And those are people who are choosing to support me, and they're choosing not to spend that money on something else. So I think there's just more competition. It's kind of like cool in a lot of ways. And just this whole community of people who've descended on, you know, there's Indiegogo, Zoop, all these other places too, but like Kickstarter seems to be a really big one. And they just kind of descended on it as a way to find indie books that you can't really get out there otherwise.
Yeah, that I think like independent artists have such a freedom to kind of just paint the story they want. As I would assume a lot of the DC and Marvel stuff I've kind of steered away from and kind of went to Dark Horse or IDW just because like I enjoy something different. Like I feel like some of the stuff gets very formulaic, and I enjoy like a Patreon or a Kickstarter rather, or some other type of more individualized comic book, just because the story is kind of cooler to me most of the time.
Yeah. I mean, you kind of see the same thing in TV production. You know, a lot of the bigger networks and stuff will once a network finds something that works, they kind of just stick to that until it is definitely dead before they start to look for something else. So you get like risk averse. Your job is to, you know, keep the stock price up, and you know you got to sell what you know is going to sell, and so they stick with what they know works. They will go a little less risky. I'm only trying to get 100 people to buy my book, so I can do whatever I want. And if I can find 100 people that I can convince it's a good idea, I'm good. Right. You know, I don't have to pay all those people that work for, you know, Marvel. So, you know, I can take a risk with my Captain America because I don't really need to sell it to keep the lights on. It's a passion thing for me only.
Yeah.
So.
Oh yeah, that's awesome.
But
so can you tell me a little bit about? Yeah, sorry, I mean to talk over you.
No.
Thorny Comics. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Like you said, founder of, right? So what is that mainly the Kickstarter stuff, or do you have a bunch of other IPs and things like that you're working on?
So I have a lot of stuff I'm working on. I'm actually doing a ton of things that I shouldn't be doing, so many of them. So I originally started it. The idea was to print my own books, and I was going to do that initially through Kickstarter, and then I wanted to do sort of what Kickstarter traditionally was, where you make one. So this, for example, is a 10-page short story, and then I would want to use that to pitch it around as a series to someone and see if there's a publisher that wants to pick it up and put it in stores. What I will probably do is come back with another issue or two of this at least, and then I would still publish it. I might publish it myself and put it in stores, and that'll be what Thorny Comics does, you know, a little further in the future. But it won't just be my stuff now. So I'm doing the Cicada's mine. I'm doing another book called Grizzly Crew about a bunch of pirates who are also bears, and I fucking love comics. And then a really good friend of mine is Richard Davis, who does Cult of Dracula. He did Cult of Dracula, Rise of Dracula. He's doing Prometheus and Chains right now. I think it's at Red 5 Comics. I'm doing the next sequel, the next chapter in the Dracula story. So my next Kickstarter with Thorny Comics will be the Reign of Dracula with Rich Davis.
That's fun.
Yeah, and I'm really excited about that. We're doing like double issues for the Kickstarter. I'm a really big, I think that like if someone's going to support me on Kickstarter, I want that person to still want to go buy the book in stores. I don't want it to cannibalize each other, you know, and I don't want the Kickstarter to cannibalize sales in stores. I want stores to do well. So whatever I'm doing on Kickstarter for any of my Kickstarters will be things you can only get on Kickstarter. And then when things go into stores, it'll be a different format. Like with Reign of Dracula, for example, we're going to print it as black and white with an ink wash. And then when it goes into stores, it'll be smaller issues, you know, normal floppies, traditional floppies, full color. So it'll be a different thing. Yeah, then you get a different thing here than we get in stores, and after that, I'm publishing. There's an anthology series called the Cloakroom. It's an offshoot of anyone who's ever been in Scott Snyder's writing workshop class, which he calls his company is the Best Jacket Press. So the first publishers came up with this thing, the Cloakroom, and it's sort of a play on the jacket thing. And then basically it's short stories written and created by people in his orbit, in his class. So I'm publishing the next round of that. That'll be early next year. So I have a lot of stuff that's mine, a lot of stuff that's other people's. It's going to be a lot of fun. And the goal for all of it is to, kickstart it, give everyone a really cool collectible now, and eventually put everything in stores.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you lean towards horror stuff? Sorry, I just know like Dracula and like the cicada, like the horror part of the cicada stuff, and like I don't know if the anthology will have horror in it, but do you enjoy that more than most other?
Anthology probably will. I mean, Grizzly Crew is a kid's story. Grizzly Crew is like a children's, pirate story about kids and what they're afraid of. But I would say one of the things I enjoy about comics is how kind of scary and violent they can be without being hokey. Yeah. Like there are things that if you wrote into a movie script and then you did them in the movie, you'd kind of like shake your head and go, that's just ludicrous. It just is like campy and silly. And you can kind of be really graphical and violent and scary on a comic page. So I've been enjoying that. And I think prior to this, I don't think I didn't grow up watching horror. I wasn't like into it. But a lot of the writers who write that I like, are writing horror stuff or supernatural thriller kind of things,
Sure. Makes sense.
So when does the Kickstarter launch?
So it's on right now. I'm about 2 weeks into it. There's about 2 weeks left. It ends on October 13th, which is a Friday. It ends on Friday the 13th, right at midnight. But it's up and running right now. One thing I am doing, so as one of my stretch goals that I decided to just put in the book without hitting a goal, I'm doing a contest online for any up and coming artists who want to get published. So anyone who wants to draw my character, draw the Cicada Samurai, you can do your own rendition of it. Tag Thorny Comics, hashtag Cicada Samurai. I'll find it. I'm going to pick 4 or 5 of my favorite ones. Pay the artist. I have $50 for each of these, so an up-and-coming artist, it's like a nice payday. Get published. It'll go in the book. And the deadline for that is actually next Friday, so October 6th. But if it's something I just like to try and get out there.
That's great.
Trying to get some artists to take advantage of the opportunity.
Yeah.
Where can everybody find you online, Jerry?
What's that?
Where can everybody find you online?
I'm at Thorny Comics. Thorny like a rose has a thorn. At Thorny Comics on Twitter, on Instagram, mostly on Instagram, and I'm the only Thorny Comics on Facebook.
Does every comic have a thorn?
No, that'd be amazing. It's my daughter's middle name is Rose, and so she was like, "Can you put the rose? Can the rose be your logo?" So the rose is my logo with like a thorny little rose.
Nice.
So she's part of the team now. So
good.
Cool. Thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with us and chat. I hope we get to talk to you more when you get some of these other projects out, because I'd love to talk to you about that true crime thing once it comes out.
Oh yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, look, we don't have to go on the internet to chat. You can just reach out. I'm happy to chat.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. So for all of us, follow us